Nazi Germany's Krummlauf, the rifle that could shoot around corners. As the Second World War entered its final and most desperate phase, Nazi Germany's engineers scrambled to produce ever more exotic weapons in a last-ditch effort to turn the tide of a war that was already slipping irreversibly from their grasp. Among the strangest of these late-war inventions was a curved barrel attachment known as the Krummlauf, a device designed to let a soldier fire his rifle around corners, out of a bunker slit, or from inside a tank without ever exposing himself to enemy fire. It sounds like something plucked from a cartoon, yet this bizarre piece of engineering was very real, and it represents one of the more fascinating dead ends of German wartime innovation. A weapon born of desperation. By 1943 and 1944, the German military found itself fighting an increasingly brutal war on multiple fronts, with Soviet forces pushing relentlessly from the east and Allied troops preparing to land in the west. In this atmosphere of mounting desperation, German ordnance engineers were tasked with developing solutions to very specific tactical problems, one of which was the vulnerability of soldiers engaged in close-quarters urban combat and armored warfare. Tank crews in particular faced a persistent danger from enemy infantry who could approach a vehicle's blind spots and destroy it with hand-thrown explosives or shaped charge weapons before the crew inside even knew they were under threat. The concept of a curved barrel to fire was not entirely new, with variations having been experimented with by several nations earlier in the century, but it was Germany's rapidly maturing STG-44 assault rifle program that finally gave the idea a practical home. The STG-44, widely regarded as the world's first true assault rifle, fired an intermediate 7.92 by 33 mm cartridge and was gas-operated, making it an ideal platform onto which engineers could attach a curved barrel extension without needing to redesign the entire weapon from scratch. The device that resulted from this work was designated the Krummlauf, a German word that translates roughly to curved barrel or crooked run. How the Krummlauf worked. The Krummlauf attachment fit onto the muzzle of the standard STG-44 rifle in place of the normal barrel extension, and it came in several variants depending on the degree of curvature required for the tactical situation at hand. The most common version bent the path of the bullet by 30 degrees, while more extreme variants curved the barrel by 45 degrees and even a dramatic 90 degrees for the most specialized applications. To help the shooter aim, despite the fact that the barrel no longer pointed in the same direction as the sights, engineers fitted the device with a small periscope-style sighting mechanism mounted above the bend, allowing the soldier to see around the obstacle he was using for cover while keeping his body safely tucked behind it. The physics involved in forcing a bullet through a curved barrel created enormous engineering headaches. As a standard 7.92 mm round traveled down the bent barrel at high velocity, the sheer force of the curve placed tremendous stress on the barrel's rifling, and the bullet itself would frequently fragment or shed pieces of its jacket as it was forced to change direction mid-flight. Engineers attempted to mitigate this by drilling small gas vents along the curved portion of the barrel, which helped bleed off some of the pressure and reduce the wear on the mechanism, though this solution only went so far. The most extreme version of the device, the 90-degree variant, intended for firing directly out of a tank hatch or from behind a wall at a right angle, proved almost unusable in practice. The barrel wore out after firing as few as 300 rounds, a remarkably short service life for a piece of military hardware, and the accuracy of the weapon at this extreme angle was so poor that it offered little practical value beyond simply spraying bullets in a general direction. The 30-degree variant fared considerably better, with barrels that could withstand several thousand rounds before requiring replacement, and it saw somewhat wider distribution among frontline units compared to its more extreme siblings. Intended uses on the battlefield. The primary vision German planners had for the Krummlauf centered on urban combat and armored vehicle defense, two forms of warfare that had become increasingly critical as the war ground on into brutal city fighting on the Eastern Front and eventual Allied advances into German territory itself. Infantry versions of the device were meant to allow a soldier crouched behind a wall or positioned at the corner of the building to engage an enemy target without exposing any part of his body beyond the muzzle of the weapon itself, a significant tactical advantage in the kind of close, lethal street fighting seen in cities like Stalingrad and later in Berlin. A specialized version was also developed for mounting inside armored vehicles, allowing tank crews to fire the weapon out through a small port in interior in order to defend against enemy infantry attempting to approach the vehicle's flanks or rear, areas that were traditionally difficult for a tank crew to cover with the vehicle's main armament. This was a direct response to the increasingly common tactic of infantry using handheld anti-tank weapons like the Soviet PTRD anti-tank rifle or improvised explosive charges to disable armored vehicles at close range, a threat that had become a serious concern for German panzer crews by the middle of the war. Why the Krummlauf ultimately failed. Despite the ingenuity behind its concept, the Krummlauf suffered from problems that made it impractical for widespread use. Beyond the barrel wear and reduced accuracy already mentioned, the device added significant weight and bulk to the already substantial STG-44, making the weapon considerably more awkward to handle in the field. The periscope sighting system, while clever in theory, proved difficult to use effectively under the stress of actual combat, and soldiers found it nearly impossible to achieve any real precision when firing at anything beyond very close range. Manufacturing capacity was also a critical limiting factor. By the time the Krummlauf entered even limited production in 1944 and 1945, German industry was being pounded relentlessly by Allied strategic bombing campaigns, and resources that might have gone toward refining and mass-producing the device were instead being consumed by the more pressing need to simply keep basic rifle and ammunition production running at all. As a result, only a small number of these curved barrel attachments were ever manufactured, and surviving photographic and documentary evidence of their combat use remains scarce, leading many historians to conclude that whatever units did receive them saw only extremely limited and largely experimental deployment before the war's end. A curious footnote in military history. When Germany finally surrendered in May of 1945, the Krummlauf, along with countless other exotic late-war weapons projects, was left behind as a strange relic of a regime that had increasingly turned to unconventional engineering solutions in a futile attempt to compensate for its collapsing strategic position. Allied intelligence teams that captured surviving examples of the device were fascinated by its design, and several examples were shipped back to the United States and Britain for study, where they occasionally turn up today in military museums and private collections as a curiosity of wartime desperation and inventiveness. The Krummlauf never came close to changing the outcome of the war, nor did it ever see the kind of widespread battlefield use its designers had originally envisioned. Yet it remains one of the most memorable examples of the sheer inventive desperation that characterized German weapons development in the war's final years, a testament to engineers who were willing to bend the very laws of ballistics, quite literally, in the hope of buying their collapsing nation just a little more time.